lot of times we work hard, we do great work, and we kind of wait to be recognized. And that doesn't work out so well. So we have to be able to, in a way that maintains that brand, right? We don't want to be seen as obnoxious or bragging about ourselves all the time, but we still have to find a way to promote our work so that people see us as the right person for the next step as you're thinking about that journey to your perfect job.
Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast, where together we explore ways to live our most joyful, aligned, vibrant lives. On this podcast, we draw inspiration from the lessons embedded in other women's stories, and we use them to catalyze our own growth and success. And we explore concepts and techniques from the fields of psychology and design thinking that can help us thrive and make the most of the one and only life we're ever going to have. My name is April Seifert. I'm a psychologist, an entrepreneur, and a self-proclaimed life experience junkie, and I'm your host and friend along this journey. This podcast is supported by Modern Well, a woman-centered co-opportunity workspace in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Friend, it is time to start living vibrantly, by design, and with intention. Here we go. Hey friends, welcome back to the Women Inspired Podcast. My name is April Seifert, and I am your host, and I'm so excited to bring to you this week's interview. This week, you are going to meet a woman named Carla Howard. Carla has a day job, like many of us do. She works for a corporation, and we're going to talk about that during her interview. But she also has a side business that really grew out of a need that other people were coming to her and asking her for mentorship as they rose in their career. So Carla has this side business because her passion is to help women become more influential and promote themselves so that they can rise in their careers with confidence and grace. And I think that is so incredible. So in this interview, you're going to hear some amazing things about, number one, I talk a lot with entrepreneurs in this podcast, but you're going to hear the flip side of the coin. Someone who loves being in a corporate environment, and she's going to give some tips about how to make the most of that experience. So I'm excited for you to hear that part of the conversation. I'm also really excited for you to hear the part of the conversation where we talk about self-promotion, something that feels so gross to so many of us. We worry about being too braggy, and it just feels icky to talk about the things that we've accomplished. Carla has some incredibly great tips and also a free resource for you. So stick around in the interview for that part. And then last, oh my God, I go on such a soapbox about something that I've studied extensively in my psychology career. And that is this notion of implicit bias or unconscious bias. I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm just going to leave a little cliffhanger there. Just know that we're going to have a really great conversation about how that affects all of us and what we can do about it and how we can start to just calm down about the whole situation, but make some really meaningful improvements. So there's so much in this week's episode. I can't even stand it, but it is so actionable and going to be so powerful. So please stick around. Amazing resources at the end, and I can't wait for you guys to meet Carla Howard. Carla, I'm so excited that you're here for this episode of the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited to join the show.
So I'm really excited about what we're going to be talking about today because I get a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of women who are aspiring entrepreneurs on the show, but you have a slightly different angle for us to talk about that I think will resonate with quite a few people who are listening to this. So I'm really pumped for you to be here. Before we dive into all of that, though, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and just help us get to know you?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. So I live in Arizona, and my father was in the military, so I learned a lot about networking very, very early on. When you're a military brat, as I like to call myself, you end up having to really kind of learn the political landscape and how you can fit in at a very, very young age. And maybe a little bit differently than some entrepreneurs or women growing in their careers is that I actually love working in a corporation. And even though I do have my business where I provide mentoring, I'm a keynote speaker, I do workshops for corporations, I am not one of the entrepreneurs who has a big red circle around a date on the calendar where they're planning on leaving their day job, because I absolutely love not only the job that I have, but working in corporate America. So that might be something a little bit different for your listeners.
I love that. Okay. So you tell me a little bit about that. Actually, let's just dive in right there. You say that you love working inside a corporation. That's not something that I commonly hear. And I think there's a variety of reasons for that. But tell me your experience and what is it about it that you love?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why I enjoy it. I love the collaboration. I love the opportunity to work across different cultures. And in the role that I serve, I work for Avnet, and Avnet is a business-to-business provider of electronic components and programmable devices, and we support makers from the inception of their ideas through development and prototype, and then distribution through our global supply chain. And in my role leading the Operational Excellence Group, I lead our change management and our continuous improvement groups. And in that role, I have the opportunity to work across different cultures. I do some international travel, and I have a fantastic leadership team that supports not only the work that I do internally with Avnet, but they're incredibly supportive of the work I do externally, specifically around the promotion and the mentoring and serving women as they rise in their careers. So that situation it's just perfect for me because it satisfies the process side of me, the part of me that wants to help people be successful in their careers and through transition, which is really what the change management work is all about. And then my personal drive to support women as they rise in their careers and create that professional life that's going to be satisfying and fulfilling to them.
So how do we do that? Actually, I would love to dive in there because, as I mentioned, it's not common for me to hear somebody say that they love working in a corporate environment. What I hear more often is, I would love to quit my job, but I'm afraid to become an entrepreneur, or I don't know how to start a business, or I'm not sure what I would do. Lots of people want to move out. For those people who there's a lot of reasons why a corporate job is a really great thing. So there's been some changes with this, but there are some elements of stability there, and there are some elements of predictability oftentimes in a corporate job. How do people make the most of that? How do they get the best experience possible out of a corporate type job?
Well, I think there's a couple of pieces to that. And the first one that comes to mind is really focus on a spirit of service. I always talk with my team about, we have to find a way to say yes, and that can be very, very difficult. But if people are coming to you with a problem to solve, telling them who else they can go to solve the problem is not what's going to get you to that next level, or to be seen as someone who has the answers or has the thought process that's going to help figure out the answers. So always finding a way to say yes, even if it's a different yes than maybe that person came with. The other thing that I think is incredibly important, and we forget about this, is really focusing on our personal brand. And by that, I mean, it's kind of a tired phrase, so I almost hate saying it out loud. But, when I think about brand, I think about, what do people expect from me? When they see me walking down the hall, what is it they're going to expect when I enter a meeting room? Am I going to be disruptive? Am I going to be argumentative? Am I a good listener? Will I be the one who's focused on solution? And the way that we interact, every single interaction, every conversation that we have drives what people are going to expect from us. And the same thing is true of the way that we dress, and even the expression on our faces. If you're always rushing down the hall and you're kind of going breakneck speed and you look frazzled, you don't appear strategic. So it's all the parts and pieces that make us who we are, and really being thoughtful about, what is it that I want to do? What would my dream job look like? And what kind of a product, if I were a product, is going to get me to that position? And then every single thing that you do, say, wear, everything in your day should be deliberate so that you are creating that product that's going to create the life that you desire to lead. So I think that's an important piece. And then something that I think women really struggle with is this ability to really showcase their work. A lot of times we work hard, we do great work, and we kind of wait to be recognized, and that doesn't work out so well. So we have to be able to, in a way that maintains that brand, right? We don't want to be seen as obnoxious or bragging about ourselves all the time, but we still have to find a way to promote our work so that people see us as the right person for the next step as you're thinking about that journey to your perfect job.
That's so interesting. A couple of things that I want to hit on there. The personal brand piece is really interesting. And something that I like to work with people on is something called life design, where you take a human-centered design approach to figuring out, how you want your life to be structured, whether that is your career, whether that's relationships, whether that's hobbies, other things. And what I think is interesting about this personal brand notion, and you're right, that does get thrown around a lot, but it is still useful to talk about. What I think is interesting about that is there's a giant opportunity within that to figure out, number one, who are you at your core? Like at your core, what are your values and what's important to you? And then what does the best version of you look like? And using that information, like starting there, who are you at your core and what do you look like when you're at your best? Construct a personal brand from there, because it gives you a really clear picture then of how you want to be projecting yourself and how you want others to see you. And two, how you want to show up so that you can look back and say, I'm proud of how I handled that, even if it wasn't perfect. And even if I didn't make that other person perfectly happy, I lived in accordance with my values and I stood up as the person that I want to be, that personal brand that I want to be, and that feels really good. So I definitely wanted to call that out. But the other piece is actually a direction that I would love to go, is that where you're hinting is, and where you're starting to move is in this direction of not waiting to be recognized and being more proactive about telling other people about some of the incredible things that we're doing and the accomplishments that we have. So self-promotion in a nutshell. That's so hard. It's so hard to do. It feels gross. We feel like we're bragging. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like, what's the experience of people you've worked with? Is that the experience they've had? And how do we do it in a way that doesn't feel so yucky?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it can feel really yucky. And I think the thing that makes it feel that way, or we fear coming across that way, is we've all had that experience where someone is constantly talking about themselves, what they want to do, how great they are, and we know how that makes us feel, right? And we don't want to be that person. The good news is there's not two choices. We don't either not say anything or we're an obnoxious jerk, right? There is definitely some middle ground there. And when I think about doing this in an organization, a couple of things. I think you got to start with why. Why is it that showcasing your work is important to you? So in other words, why would rising in your organization matter to you? And that gets back to what you're talking about, April. At your core, what is it you want to achieve? What's important to you? What are your values? So why would rising matter? Because that's going to help you recognize who are the people that you most want to serve, and how can you improve their lives by doing that? And even if you're in a corporation that isn't in the healing arts or in the medical field, I'm a perfect example, right? I work in a technology company, but I love helping people rise in their careers. I'm a coaching leader. And so having the opportunity to be a coaching leader really fills my cup, right? So that's one of the reasons why rising and moving into a leadership position is so important to me. But we're all going to have different reasons, but getting really clear on that is going to be the very first step. And then you want to think about how would you having increased visibility help you serve them better. And I think especially for women, when we flip that narrative around and say, well, how can I serve? then that changes the reason that I'm showcasing my work from being a selfish motive, and it moves it into I'm really doing this so that I can serve others and serve more people. And then once you have that, you can really take a look at what's holding you back. And we talked a little bit about those either or stories that we tell ourselves that keeps us from sharing our story. And if you're holding yourself back, and if it's that story because you're telling yourself, oh, all these negative things are going to happen, it's really important to reframe that. And instead of thinking about what are all the terrible things that could happen if I share the things that I'm working on or the things that I'm proud of, reframe that to say, what are the positive things that could happen if I share what I'm really passionate about? And really getting clear on that. And then lastly, creating that visibility plan so that you can identify who in my organization do I need to have visibility from? Because you don't have to talk about what you're doing or your work with everybody. Many times it's a few targeted people. And I'm going to strongly recommend this, that people focus on who can they target in their organization who could be a sponsor for them. Well, that sponsor is going to need to know the work that you're doing and where you've had success so that they can sponsor you behind closed doors. And then think about the things that you are truly most proud of and write 2 or 3 sentences about the project, the assignment, or that scenario. Because when someone asks you, what are you working on? To say, I'm really proud of this. That's a way to showcase your work that doesn't come across self-serving, right? You're talking about what you're proud of and what's important to you. And then lastly, really not being afraid to share your passion or your enthusiasm, because I will tell you as a hiring leader, if I know someone is passionate and enthusiastic and wants to learn, I am going to look at giving that person a chance much more quickly than I'm going to look at someone that has all the, the perfect resume, says all the right things in the interview, comes with the exact education that I'm looking for. I can teach someone what I need them to do in a job. What I want is a collaborator, someone who's going to be supportive of our team and supportive of our customers and clients, someone who will find a way to say yes and who wants to be there. So I think if you can show those things and find a way to get comfortable with showing your passion, that is the way that you can showcase your work that does not come across in a self-serving way. Because truly, if you approach it that way, you are serving the people in your organization and you're helping them achieve their dreams. And who doesn't want that person around?
Mm-hmm. I love all those tips. What's funny, there's this funny analogy that is going to sound so out there, popped into my mind, but I promise it's relevant. So as we were talking about, the importance of self-promoting and the importance of talking about your accomplishments and not waiting to be recognized, the analogy that popped into my head is one that highlights something in psychology called the spotlight effect. So think about, many of us have joined a gym in the past, right? Like lots of times, maybe at the beginning of the year or for some other reason, people join a gym. This is where this is going to seem out of left field. I promise it's relevant. So you join a gym and lots of people, not everyone, but lots of people feel intimidated about going into certain parts of the gym. Maybe it's the free weights part of the gym, right? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with dumbbells or a barbell. I feel dumb being here. That might be intimidating. Or maybe it's the area of the gym with all the complicated weight machines. Like they're worried they don't know how to use them. Or maybe it's the cardio machines. Like, how do I even turn this thing on and make it do what I want it to do? The reason why we feel intimidated is because of this spotlight effect. We think everyone's looking at us. We think everyone's paying attention to us. But in reality, all of them are in their own little bubble too. And here's where it gets relevant. The same thing goes for your job. So you're in your career and you think everyone's watching you kick butt on that project. Everyone's seeing everything you're doing. They're heads down on their own work. They're worrying about their own deadlines, their own responsibilities, the meetings they have coming up. They are not focused on what you're doing, for better or worse. So the problem there is that you could be killing it, and people aren't going to notice to the degree that you need them to in order to elevate your career. You have to say something, because it just isn't in our psychology to notice other people. We're just too, and I don't mean this in a bad way, we're just too egotistical. We're very focused on our own, tiny little circle. And so it's important to self-promote.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, think about it. If you think about, let's say you work in an office with 50 people. How much do you really know about the great work that those 50 people are doing?
That's exactly
not very much.
Yep, exactly.
So, yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing along those lines as well is, a lot of time we've been raised not to brag about ourselves, right? That's looked at as a negative attribute, and we're taught not to do that. Now, I wasn't. My parents, I have amazing parents. And in fact, I graduated from high school in 1980, and I had no idea, no clue that women couldn't do just anything they wanted to. And at that time, there was a few careers pretty much open, but I didn't know that. And I actually didn't realize it until I got into corporate America and started looking around. I'm like, where are all the women? And so my parents did a great job of not only teaching me how to really showcase my work, but also making me feel like I could do anything I wanted. And I think, this is a thing for women. We have to reprogram that don't talk about yourself message that we may have heard growing up, and reprogram that so that we're talking about ourselves appropriately and we're adding value. And if you're really focused on, here's the value I'm bringing and here's the value I can bring to you, it does not come across as self-promoting.
I want to switch gears a little bit, because you have this incredible story of working with, I think was it your daughters on, yeah. Okay, you know where I'm going. So just to set this up a little bit, Carla has this incredible story about talking to her daughters about leadership. Now, the lean in movement has really elevated the conversation around women in leadership positions and how we get ahead in our career. But it is still not, what's the right word? I don't know if common is the right word. The concept of leadership still does not jive perfectly, comfortably well with the concept of femininity or being a woman. This is something that I did actually, we were chatting before we hopped on to record. This is exactly what I did my dissertation work on in my PhD program. And things, haven't really changed since then. And I would love for you to tell the story of that conversation and exercise you did with your daughters about leadership and what you learned from that, and then what you did with that information.
Yeah, so that I'm laughing because it was such a surprise. So I read an article in the New York Times by Heather Murphy, and the title of it caught my attention. It was "Picture a Leader, Is She a Woman?" And I thought, well, that's kind of odd. There's a lot of women leaders out there. So I read the article, and in the article, she shared that when asked to draw a picture of an effective leader, both men and women almost always draw pictures of men. And there were a few pictures of men in the article, and I thought, I don't know, I wonder, I think my daughters would draw a picture of a woman. So, and it's kind of, I thought, well, it's kind of leading the witness too, right? Because here's their mom. She's a leader. I'm asking you to draw a picture of a leader. So my daughters are 28 and 32. And in fact, my younger daughter actually works with me at Avnet. So I'm like, okay, that even colors the playing field even more. Like, there's no way she's not going to draw a picture of a woman. And both of them drew pictures of men. I was floored.
That's amazing.
So, oh my gosh, I was like, are you kidding me? Your mother's standing here asking you to draw a picture.
Right.
So then I asked my granddaughter, I thought, I've got to see what my granddaughter does. So I asked Jocelyn to draw a picture of a leader, and she drew a picture of people moving boxes. And it was kind of hard to tell if they were men or women. So I said, Jocelyn, can you explain that picture to me? And she goes, sure, Emma. These people are moving boxes, and this man, he's the leader.
Wow.
And I said, I know. I was like, no. So I said, Jocelyn, do you think it's possible for a woman to be a leader of those people moving boxes? And she looked at me and said, no. And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, because you have to be strong to be a leader.
Oh, that just crushed my soul.
I know. And I'm not kidding you. The switch flipped in my head, and I thought, oh my gosh, first of all, I have to do something. And B, we can do better than this. We can do better than this. So I started thinking about it. It wouldn't leave me. And I applied to do a TEDx presentation, which I did. I did it in Austin. It's online on YouTube. It's under my name, or you can Google "Picture a Leader. Is she a woman?"
I'll just link that. I'll link it up on your show notes page.
Okay, great. Thank you. And the feedback is chilling. Like, I have women and men sending me pictures that their daughters and their sons draw. And I mean, we have to ask our sons these same questions, because boys should see themselves as leaders, no doubt about it. They absolutely must. But if we're going to change this trajectory that we're on, they also have to see women as leaders. Totally. And I don't think it's that we don't think women are capable. I think it's simply we see what we see. So, you walk into, it's getting better, but you walk into corporate America and you see men that are leading. Kind of a funny story. Our CEO at Avnet, Bill Emilio, shared that at a presentation I was at the other day, that he asked his daughter to do the exercise, and she drew a picture of a man, and his wife is a CEO of a huge successful nonprofit. And he was surprised by that, right? But I think what happens is we see men in leadership positions, and it is that unconscious bias that then we don't see women there, then we don't imagine ourselves there. And that's the thing that worries me most about our young women and our professionals coming into the workplace. So, as I shared, I have the most amazing supportive parents. And when I entered the workplace, I never saw myself as anything higher than a manager. I didn't think about a director. I didn't think about a VP. And it never crossed my mind that I might even entertain the thought of being a CEO. Not because anybody told me I couldn't, but I didn't see anybody like me doing those things, So I think we have to start young, and we have to start with a little bit of imagination, and really talking to our young people about, what do they see leadership looks like, and helping them see themselves there.
I love this. Okay, so on the unconscious bias piece, I'm going to jump on a mini soapbox here for a second. I'll try to be brief. So that is exactly what I did my dissertation on. And for people who the word unconscious, it sounds like, oh, you're going to hypnotize people, and it just sounds like a really weird word to use. All that means is that there's parts of our brain that we control with, we deliberately control them. So this is if I tell you to add two numbers together, you're going to do a deliberate process where you're going to really think. It's the thinking that we control. Then there's a whole host of stuff that goes on behind the scenes that we don't have any control over. Parts of that, so some of that, the really, really uncontrollable stuff, is the part of your brain that makes your heart beat. We don't have a whole lot of control over that. Then there's this level of cognition, this unconscious, implicit, some people call it, level of cognition that all it does is it runs off of associations. It says, okay, in the things that I've seen and read and noticed in the world around me, when this thing is there, this other thing is there, they must be associated. If you repeatedly are shown over and over and over and over and over, men in leadership positions, women carrying babies. Men in leadership position, women carrying babies. Think back to sitcoms in the 70s and 80s. You'll see it like crazy. You still see it now. It still exists now, which is why this still persists with your grandkids, right? Mm-hmm. But that's that part of the brain that It's not that sophisticated. All it's doing is saying, when that thing happens, this other thing happens a lot of the time. So I'm going to associate those things really closely in my mind. And what happens there is that when you see now, as you're walking through life, when you see one of those things, so leader, you think about the concept of leader, your unsophisticated automatic brain automatically fires everything that's associated to leader. And it learned that through experience. So if you see leader, most of us will fire male in our mind, even women, because we all saw the same things. And if you want to test yourself, you can go to the URL, and I'll put this in the show notes too. It's to Project Implicit. If you go to implicit.harvard.edu, so this is something that Harvard University puts out, you can actually test yourself on the gender and career test. This will look at your cognitive associations between women and family and men and careers. So in this case, sort of a proxy for leadership. Almost everyone, I'm going to ruin the punchline, almost everyone who does it will come out with an association between men and career. I do. I studied this for 5 years in my PhD program. It's because we were all raised in the same society. It doesn't make you a bad person at all. You don't have these deliberate evil intentions. It just means that your reptilian, implicit, subconscious brain just did its job and it associated those things because that's what you saw. So that's like, it's such a misunderstood thing. People get like this knee-jerk sort of negative reaction to it because it feels like you're being accused of something. That isn't it at all. This is just sort of how the world trains us to operate. But the only way that we can shift that is just knowing that it's there and working hard, now moving that into that deliberate part of our brain. Okay, I know this is operating. I'm going to deliberately change the way that I'm thinking in situations where I think that this bias might be operating. So like at work and maybe in a physician's office or other places like that, that might be, places where you wouldn't stereotypically see women. Okay, end rant. I'm like...
Yeah, but it was a good one.
I could go on for so long. Please don't Google my dissertation because it is like long and not that fun to read. But that pretty much is the gist of it.
Well, I love that. And it brings to mind the need for corporations then to have very specific programs in place that are going to battle that unconscious bias, because we are not making ground. And the rate that this is going, it's ridiculous. I read something the other day. It's like at our current rate, it's going to take 120 years to get, gender parity and leadership. And that's ridiculous. We don't want to wait 120 years. So, we need to do some really, really deliberate things as organizations, such as insisting on a diverse slate of candidates for openings and insisting on a diverse interview panel when we're interviewing people, because that's going to help push that forward. Doing other things that are much more company specific, but Harvard has what they call their ambassador program, and it's a group of men who are passionate about creating gender equality. And corporations can do this too, where men can get together and say, here's what we're going to accept, here's what we're not going to accept. We're not going to speak on panels if we don't have at least 50% representation from women. We're going to decline those, and really get specific about actions that they're going to take to help move forward. Because make no mistake, men absolutely have to be part of this solution. They are the decision makers today, and they're the ones choosing who are their proteges, who are they going to coach and mentor, who are they going to sponsor, right? And help get into those next leadership roles. And if they're not part of the solution, we're just not going to make ground.
I totally agree. And something that I want to reiterate, and now that we've kind of moved into that territory, it's even more important. I truly believe, maybe I'm Pollyanna over here, but I don't think so. I believe that people are good people at their core. I do. There's some proportion on one end of the spectrum who are not good people. That's fine. We'll just assume that you're not them. You meaning the listener, and Carla, you and me. We're not those people.
No, we're not.
I assume that most people, and I believe that most people are good people. This means that in a hiring situation, which historically for STEM positions, for leadership positions, has typically favored men, I do not believe that that hiring manager, who may have been a man, like, I don't think that person was sitting there thinking, wow, I really hate women. How can I keep them out of this job? I don't believe that for a second. Again, thinking back to how implicit bias and subconscious bias happens, it happens outside of your awareness. You don't realize that, that bias can be coloring. So for example, or coloring your judgment. So for example, there was research done about this very topic, so hiring people, and one group of people was given a set of resumes. One resume had a person who had a PhD and little experience, like very little experience. The other one had a person who had lots of experience, but had a bachelor's degree. And depending upon which group of participants you were in, it was either the woman who had the PhD and the man who had the experience, or vice versa. And in all cases, the man was most likely to get hired, and the justification for why they hired shifted depending upon where the man was. So if he had a PhD, it's, wow, this guy has an advanced degree. Clearly, we need to hire him. He has some advanced knowledge over her. If it was the man who had more experience, they would downplay the importance of that PhD and say, well, but what we really need is someone with hands-on experience. And again, I don't believe that those people were sitting there thinking, man, I hate women. How do I keep from hiring them? I don't think so. It's that implicit bias that was saying, hey, leadership positions and math and engineering, that's associated with men. And it just makes you gravitate there. So it's so powerful that we don't realize it's so powerful, and it's so hidden to us. And again, you're not a bad person because it's happening. It happens to everyone. We just need to chill and acknowledge that it's happening, and then we can actually do something about it, and we can actually have our behaviors be in accordance with the good people that we are inside. Is really the biggest goal that I have for all of this.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And listen, I have to say, I've worked at several different companies, and I have worked with amazing people, great leaders. I've had great opportunities, and that's why I'm where I'm at. And I agree with you. People, I think the vast majority are just good people. And when we put these programs in place, even things like masking the names on interview, a lot of companies will say, hey, I've got an open rec. And then you get the you get the resume, and there's no name on it, or it's masked out. You can't tell if it's a man or a woman. And then you decide who you're going to move forward with. And the really, really good news is that when we move in this direction, we're helping men too, because you think about it. And I know, April, you just, recently had a child. It wasn't too long ago that there was really no such thing as paternity leave. I mean, there was maternity leave, and women could stay home and bond, and okay, that's gotten better too. But like, guys would have to take vacation. Like, you didn't even get a week to be home with your new baby. So this recognition that people are people and we have the same needs within the family is helping men as well. One of the programs that I think is just such a great idea for organizations to invest in is this idea of a returnship program. And that's much like an internship program, where you have, when mid-career professionals have been out of work for at least 5 years because they've been in a caretaking role, it gives them, that internship kind of an experience where they can come into an organization, learn some new, technologies, tools, kind of get their resume beefed back up, and either stay there at that organization or move on to another organization. And that's going to benefit our men too. It's going to benefit mothers, women who stay home to care for their parents or their children or a loved one, but it's also going to benefit the men who find themselves in that situation. So I'm particularly keen on programs and solutions that don't just pinpoint women, but say, hey, listen, we're all people, and let's make sure that our needs are met. We've got to work, And work should be a good place. It should be a place we enjoy coming to, and we all feel supported, and that our opportunities are open to us.
That's wonderful. I could keep talking to you all day, and this could really end up being, the longest episode of my podcast ever. But we can't do that. So I know this is going to be a topic that people might want to, learn more about and learn more about you and the work that you're doing. So where can people find you online to just stay in touch?
Yeah, no, that's great. So I am on LinkedIn, Carla Howard. I'd love to hear from your listeners there, and please do include a message letting me know where we connected. But you heard this podcast. I do have a website as well, theprofessionalwomansmentor.com, and you can email me at carla@theprofessionalwomansmentor.com. I do keynote presentations and workshops, and I have a limited number of one-on-one mentoring that I do for professional women. And then just one thing that I thought I would offer to your listeners, April, is I do have a worksheet. It's called Showcase Your Work, where we walk through the different steps that you can take to do that promotion, not self-promotion, but really showcasing your valuable work in a way that's going to help build your brand. And I'd be glad to send that to your listeners. I'll send the information over to you so that you can include a button for them to shoot me an email, and I'm happy to send that over.
That's awesome. For folks who are, interested in this topic, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Carla to get that worksheet. We were talking about it a little bit before we hopped on to record, and it just sounds like such a great resource. And not only that, but it sounds like a really methodical way of going through, doing something that can be really really difficult for us, put it that way. So it can be something that's tough for us to do, to think about how we can make ourselves more visible. Before actually I close out this interview, there's a couple of things, Carla, for your knowledge too, and for people listening. If you're interested in this topic, there's a couple of other interviews that I did that I absolutely want to highlight. It's funny because they were back to back. Episode number 15, I interviewed a woman named Meredith Jones. She is a hedge fund money manager, and she wrote a book called Women of the Street: Why Female Money Managers Generate Higher Returns and How You Can Too. It was such a great conversation that followed a very similar track about her experience in an industry that is super not dominated by women at all. It's a very, male heavy industry, and she's had just amazing experiences as a result of that. So I had to highlight that. And then also episode 16 is with a woman named Jen Hunt. She was actually my PhD advisor, which is awesome.
Oh, neat.
Yes. But she gets into some of this implicit stuff, and she actually does this amazing work with the impact on young girls of showing them princess imagery versus superhero imagery. So as a woman who has two daughters, this was very interesting for me to hear, but really cool research. Had to plug those two episodes. If you're interested in what we've talked about today, you'd really love those two episodes. So episode 15 and 16 of the podcast are really great ones too. Ms. Carla, this has been phenomenal. Like I said, I could talk to you for the rest of the day, but I know that both of us have things that we need to do, as do my listeners. So I just want to say thank you. Your work is so powerful. It was so great of you to take the time to chat with us today, and to offer that PDF to my audience. I think that's just a great asset. So thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. I so enjoyed it, April.
So awesome, right? I mean, so awesome. You guys all want to run out and talk to people about all the amazing things you're doing, don't you? I really hope you guys enjoyed that interview. I loved talking to Carla. As you can tell, I could have chatted with her all day long. But unfortunately, we had to cut things off because, we have a time limit here, and I know people need to get back to their lives. So I want to talk about a few things. Number one, I want to talk about that notion of personal brand. I brought up this idea of, life design, and it seems like it's not a related topic to talking about personal branding, but it really is, because they both start from the same place. They both start from a place of self-awareness, and extremely honest self-awareness. What are your values as a person? What are your strengths as a person? What are your weaknesses? Let's be honest, we all have them. What are they? And what do you look like when you're at your best? If you start by gathering those 4 pieces of information, your personal brand will begin to take shape. Who is it that you want to show up as every single day? Are you going to get there every day? Probably not. I mean, nobody can do anything 100%. But having that crystal clear picture in your mind of who's that person that you want to be known as being. What's the brand that you want to be associated with you? When you walk into a room, what do you want people to know about you right from the start? Knowing those 4 pieces of information, so values, strengths, weaknesses, and what you look like at your best. Get those down and use those as a starting place for developing your personal brand. That's exactly where we start with Life Design Lab, my 6-week program, going through the major life design process. That's exactly where we start in that program, and that's where I think you should start with this personal branding this personal branding process. Side note on Life Design Lab, doors are still closed right now. I'm likely going to open them again in the near future. So if you are at all interested and you want to be the first to know, and also if I run any promotions, it'll be to the group who responds to these offers. Head over to my website. You can hop on the Life Design Lab waitlist from my website, and you'll be the first to know when the doors open, and you'll also be the people that I send offers to. So just FYI, if you're at all interested in that, I'd get on that list. The second thing that I want to talk about is self-promotion. Oh my God, it can be so hard to do. I talk on this podcast every single week. I sit here and run my mouth on this podcast every single week, and it is still so hard for me to talk about the things that I'm accomplishing and the things that I'm proud of. It's really difficult. And so please know that if you're out there and you're thinking, this is hard for me, like this is a really difficult thing for me to do, I see the importance, but it's hard. Just know that it's hard for all of us. And that's why I'm really excited that Carla is offering the, worksheet, the PDF that she is, because it's such a valuable thing when somebody can take a really hard, icky process and just make it systematic for me. Like, okay, all I have to do is just write down my accomplishments. I'm going to start there. That's not scary. I can do that. When somebody can systematize something for you, it just makes a lot of the, not all, but a lot of the difficulty go away. So I'd highly suggest you take Carla up on that offer. And I also want to highlight, again, we talked about it during the interview, but that notion of a spotlight effect. Please think about this notion in a variety of contexts in your life. So lots of times I've gotten to the point now where I'll do something that people would, normally consider embarrassing in a public situation. And lots of times I'll think to myself, no one's looking at me. I mean, no one is paying attention to me. Half of them are on their phones. They're not even going to see it. And even if they do, I'm never seeing these people again. I don't know any of these people. So think about that notion of the spotlight effect and how many aspects of your life that can play into and the impact it has, right? So in the gym, think about there, places you're intimidated to be. The reason why you're intimidated is you think people are staring at you and judging you. They're not. They're not looking at you. They're looking at your phone, or they're worried about themselves. They feel intimidated too. So situations like that, like the gym, they're not looking at you. You don't have to be embarrassed. Situations at work, totally different context, same topic at hand, the spotlight effect. You think everyone sees the accomplishments that you have. They're not looking at you. They're doing their own projects. They're worried about their own deadlines. They don't see it. You have to tell your boss the accomplishments that you've made. And if you get the opportunity to meet with someone over your boss, you have to take that opportunity to tell that person. Take those opportunities because that is what's going to help you elevate your career. And then last, we had that conversation about unconscious bias. The thing that makes me so passionate in that area is that notion that people are not, it goes so much back to radical responsibility. I talk about it all the time, right? And this is a beautiful example of it. I talk about how you are 100% responsible for 100% of the situations you find yourself in. So here we all are, right? We've all grown up in the culture that we have. Many of us are in the United States. Even if you're not, many of us are in cultures where leadership is associated with men. It just is. We see lots of men on TV and in our lives and our family members and all these places. This is why, Carla's daughter and granddaughters drew dudes when she asked them to draw a leader. It is not your fault that you are in this situation. Radical responsibility. It's not the same as fault. You are not to blame. You are not to blame for being here. You didn't put that information in your own brain. Especially here, I hope if there are guys listening to this, please listen to me now. I don't look at you, even though I am super into, gender egalitarianism and all of these topics, I don't look at any guy and think, wow, that guy's the enemy. Man, he has it out for women. Not at all. You grew up in the same, environment that I did. And your brain formed those associations that operate outside of your awareness in the same way that mine do. You're not at fault. You're not to blame. But we all of us, me, you, women, men, everybody, we all need to take radical responsibility for the situation we're in now. We didn't cause it, but we can do something about it going forward. We can talk about our accomplishments and do it in a way that doesn't feel gross. And we can work hard to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to get a job. Does that mean we give jobs out without people being qualified? Heck no. But if simply having a gender on an application means that a qualified person won't even get an interview, man, that's disappointing. We can do better than that. So I fundamentally believe that people are good people at heart. And, going through these more deliberative processes helps our behavior be in accordance with the good people that we are inside. So that's my soapbox. I got on it again. Man, I was on that soapbox during this episode, but I'll get off of it now. And I'll wrap this episode up because it's getting long. Thank you guys so much for being with me this week. Thank you so much for tuning in every single week. If there's a woman in your life who is amazing, really killing it, and she's not giving herself enough credit, please send her this episode. Send her this episode and tell her you are incredible. And I want you to hear this because you need to talk about the incredible things you're doing. And get her Carla's PDF because women need to be talking about the incredible things that we're doing. And men, but it's really hard for us. And I'm speaking from my own experience. So thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. You have no idea how much I appreciate every single one of you and every single message that you send either through my website or on social media, comments, DMs, all of it. It just makes my heart burst every single time. So keep them coming. If there's a topic you want to hear about, I want to hear from you. Tell me what you want me to teach on. I'm going to start doing some more of those quickie, shorter form episodes once in a while. So if there's something you want me to talk about, let's do it. Let me know what you want me to chat about, and I'm happy to take it on. And if you know of an incredibly inspiring woman who you want to hear from, send her to me too. I would love an introduction, and I would love to interview her. All right, you guys, have an amazing week. Can't wait for next week. More amazing interviews to come. Bye, guys. Before we close out today, I want to say thank you to my producer, Cameron Hill, and to my incredible sponsor, Modern Well. If you want to learn more about how you can reach your goals in a one-of-a-kind work-life community, visit www.modernwell.co. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit from this inspiring message. And if you have a moment, click the link in the episode description to leave me a rating and a review on iTunes. It would mean so much to me. Finally, I want to remind you that it is absolutely possible to live a happy, fulfilling life, even in spite of all of the chaos and demands we all experience. Sign up at aprilseifert.com to gain access to tools that will help you do just that. I have carefully created and curated a set of tools that combine the powerful fields of psychology and design thinking to help you intentionally create a fulfilling, happy life you love. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and until next week, stay inspired.